Okay, the webinar is starting. Jeanette, did you want to introduce everyone?
Mhm. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeanette Towns, and I am employed by NAMI Northern Illinois as a certified recovery support specialist and a mental health advocate. I am also in charge of In Our Own Voice, which is what you are about to participate in or listen to. In Our Own Voice, participants tell their story of recovery from mental illness. And if they don't tell their story of recovery, they tell what their journey is like. So you will hear from our participants what happened to them, what they're going to introduce themselves, then they're going to tell you what happened. They're going to tell you what helps them in their present day, and they're also going to tell you what they're looking forward to in the future. So first up, we have Keisha, and she is going to tell her story first. Secondly, we will have Miss Kinsey. I will be third, and we have another participant that will be coming in to bring up the rear. So, Keisha, take it away. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Keisha Henderson, and I currently reside in Rockford, Illinois. I am currently at the time married, and I have four children, two biological and two stepchildren. As far as what I like to do in my spare time, I like to travel. I like to journal. I like to cook. I like to do art. Currently, I have a bachelor's administration degree with an emphasis in HR. And the state of everything now, I don't even know if I'm ever going to get a master's, but we'll see. Before becoming an advocate for mental health, I used to be reserved in speaking about mental health. Now I have no shame and I'm ecstatic about sharing my experience and my story to help others. For NAMI, let's start with my story. Well, before I proceed, I have to indicate that NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. It is the largest grassroots mental health organization that we have. We provide advocacy, education, support, and public awareness so that all people affected by mental illness can build their lives to be better. Here at NAMI, we provide mental health resources, advocacy, and support with those with mental health conditions as we support as well as support for loved ones who have mental health conditions. So some of our peer-led support groups include the NAMI Connections, the Family Group, a group for caregivers, mentally ill, and a group support for teens as well. And we also engage with the local community by providing a variety of learning opportunities and events throughout the year. As now, I would like to introduce myself again and start my story in regards to what I've been through and what have helped me. So growing up as a child, I was usually the black sheep of my family. I didn't really have an emotional outlet to express myself. I was, again, very much reserved and a people pleaser. Throughout my childhood and preteen years, I did lack awareness of what mental health actually meant and understanding the feelings that I was having and the emotions that I was going through when they were all over the place. After I got pregnant with my daughter in college, I ended up quitting and left my scholarship on the table for basketball. I used to play basketball. And after that major life change, that's when my adulthood or mid adulthood roller coaster began. I didn't recognize the symptoms of like any type of mania or behavioral disorders. I did notice that when it came to my emotions, I did not manage them well. I was either too sad or too angry. Basically, my emotions were extreme. I would spend money a lot just to make myself happy. So I would spend money that I didn't have, knowing that I had bills to pay, knowing that now I have a child to take care of. At that time, I was also going and dealing with toxic situations. So, being that I've always been around toxic behaviors and situations growing up in life, I did not know how to handle those certain situations. And I began to basically self medicate and abuse cannabis. And I had no self control on using it. I didn't know how to ease my mind or ease thoughts in my mind. I just used cannabis to cope. I was not much of a drinker, but if I didn't have any cannabis, I would choose alcohol just to take my mind wherever or somewhere else other than where I was at that moment. When I expressed myself to my family, I felt as if that I was a burden or bothering my family members because I was dismissed as being extra or an attention seeker, or when I would be angry, it was dismissed as I was just an angry woman and labeled as demented and labeled as a bully. There's a movie called Friday After Next. There's a character called Baby D where she's basically masculine, fighting everybody, mean, everybody scared of her. That was the nickname like family and friends would give me because that's the category, that's the characteristics that I show. So therefore, without understanding me, they just labeled me as that. Um, what really broke me and when I really needed help is when I went through my darkest times in life after this situation. So after I had my child, I ended up going to school and just trying to get my life together. And at that time, I was newly engaged, and my husband, well, my now husband, he was my fiance at the time, he had got an important phone call to rush to his older son, which is my oldest stepson. And that was in regards to his older stepson basically having an episode. So he was basically having a mental episode and he was rushing to get to him. By him rushing to get to him, he was speeding and he got pulled over by the police, and the police ended up taking him to jail. At this time, I was pregnant again with my second child, which was my youngest son. And therefore, they took him and locked him up for like maybe like a year and a half. So therefore, I was dealing with the birth of my son by myself, the whole pregnancy by myself, and I delivered my son by myself. At that same exact time and moment that I was going through that with him, my stepson ended up getting in a car accident. His mother was driving drunk and a vehicular homicide situation occurred. And I ended up taking custody of my stepson, my youngest one. So my oldest stepson is having mental troubles. I'm currently pregnant with my son now. And then now I'm taking custody of another child that's not mine. So that all weighed on me. So while I'm dealing with that, my grandmother ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. Mind you, again, all of this is happening at the same time. My grandmother ends up getting diagnosed with cancer, and I was her caretaker while she was in hospice. So I'm pregnant, about to have a baby, taking care of someone else's son, and taking care of someone who's dying of cancer, who's basically like my mom. While I'm going through that, a situation occurred with me finding out that my biological or who my real biological family was. So the family I was raised with, the father that I thought was my father, turned out to not be my father. So long story short, DNA tests were done and it turned out who my biological father was. So again, at that same time, I'm pregnant, dealing with my pregnancy, dealing with taking care of another person's child, taking care of my grandmother on hospice, and I'm finding out I'm not who I am. That situation sent me in a spiral. So at that time, I just basically I broke down. I had manic attacks, panic attacks. I was running down the street with barely any clothes on. I was just frustrated with life. I wanted to end everything. I was questioning my life. I didn't understand the betrayal. I basically just had an identity crisis and a manic panic at that moment. The behaviors that I was experiencing doing, I knew that I needed help and I knew something was wrong. So I knew I needed to get myself together. I had the sense to know that this is not normal behavior. Something is wrong. So during this time, I did end up seeing a counselor and I did get counseling. I started seeing my counselor. She's been my current counselor now for about 14 years now. I started going to counseling and I was basically evaluated and treated and diagnosed with bipolar depression disorder. So that explained why, when I was too happy or too sad, the behaviors that followed, why I did those things. So I was diagnosed with bipolar depression. I ended up prescribed with medication. I was on medication for maybe like 1 or 2 years, but I did not like that medication because of the way it made me feel and the way that I felt like an empty shell. So I felt like I had no brain, but I had a shell. So we discussed other medicinal methods and other medicinal ways to treat me, which I am currently in treating that now. So basically what other methods help me calm my nerves or calm my behavior patterns. That's what we've worked on now. And I also my counselor also encouraged me to basically start exercising, start basically doing other endeavors, getting involved with different programs. So I started to get involved with children. I started a dance team for Rockford. I was mentioned in the Rockford newspaper for helping starting the dance team back when they were starting the Transform Rockford era. I ended up starting a painting business. It's a small painting business, Serenity Queen Healing LLC. So I started a painting business and basically using painting as a therapy. I'm not an art therapist, but I use art to heal me. And I do also do that with others to freeform paint and do things of that nature. So with my counselor, she basically encouraged me to do these other things. I started to volunteer. I volunteer for the Rockford Rescue Mission. I volunteer for Think Big. I volunteer for NAMI. Um, I'm trying to think of other things that I've done in regards to that. But basically, those were things that she encouraged me to do to basically change my moods, encourage my moods to get me involved in things instead of sitting in my depression. So I did those things. I did eventually end up joining the NAMI board. So I ended up participating in the Equity and Board program, and I was able to be now currently a member on the NAMI board. So now I'm a member. I do currently volunteer when I'm able to, and I also am part of the other QPR programs that they have, and the Ending the Silence and In Your Own Voice, in which I'm speaking with you right now through that program. As of right now, I did recently just release a book as of last year, which is called Roots of Healing. And it basically is more in depth of the experience that I just told you guys about as far as what I went through. So it's more in depth about that. You can find my book on Amazon, Roots of Healing. And then right now, I just basically still currently get treatment for counseling. I not healed, I am healing. So I am still dealing with the repercussions of the situations with finding out my new family. I'm meeting my father, my sisters. You know, my life is different, a little different now. So right now, I'm just trying to still heal. I am still trying to make it through. Excuse me, make it through and make sure that my children in the future, um, they're able to express themselves. They're able to come to me when they're experiencing things of that nature. Um, but like I said, I'm still a work in progress right now. I'm still healing and working on myself. Um, and that is my story as of now, my current story.
Thank you so much, Keisha, for that dynamic story, which is your life. I really appreciate your transparency and your openness, and I'm sure that this will help a lot of people. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. And now we're going to have Miss Kinsey. Kinsey, take it away.
Excuse me, I have a cold, so I do not sound normal. Uh, so I'm Kinsey White. I'm a mom to a 2-year-old, which means my days are fueled by chaos, I think. And I have to learn how to slow down and be present with her. Becoming a mother reshaped how I see strength and patience and vulnerability. It's also deepened my empathy for others, especially when life feels overwhelming or messy. I had what I thought was a normal childhood. I thought my life was everything I'd ever wanted. From the outside, it appeared to be perfect, loving parents, a happy home. But as time went on, I realized how far from the truth that really was. My father was in my life long enough to show me that he wasn't. He was an abusive man through physical punishment, or more often, mental and emotional abuse. When I was 10, my father left. And that was the moment I realized how deeply he had shaped my sense of self. I often describe him like a tornado. At first, there's only a warning, a sense that you have time to prepare, but then out of nowhere, everything is destroyed and everyone in his path is torn apart. As I grew older, I began to feel worthless, consumed by depression, and convinced that if my own father didn't love me, no one else would. In the years that followed, I was a child desperately trying to earn her father's love, only to be shattered in the process. As I started high school, I began to sense that something was deeply wrong with me. I struggled with suicidal thoughts and self-harm, and in one year I attempted to take my life more than 10 times. I felt certain that I no longer wanted to be here. At 13, I was diagnosed with hereditary depression, but at the time I couldn't understand what was happening inside of me. It wasn't until I had a serious medical scare at 18, where I almost died, that I realized I wasn't ready to leave this world just yet. Throughout my childhood and teenage years, I was consumed by thoughts of my weight. I became obsessed with it, even reading about bulimia and anorexia to understand just how harmful they could be. What I didn't realize was that this obsession would pull me into a dangerous cycle. For 2 years, I battled bulimia, binge eating until I felt I might burst, only to purge everything I had consumed. Since I was already overweight, no one suspected a thing. I remember lying to my mom about why my eyes were bloodshot, and she believed me. I was even praised for losing weight, which only fueled my unhealthy habits. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. I hated myself and my body and knew I had to change. Stopping wasn't easy. It took months of struggle and setbacks, but I made myself do it. Learning to accept who I was and be at peace with myself was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was necessary for my healing. Then things took a turn. The one person I relied on for support, my mom, was diagnosed with a brain tumor the size of a baseball. I came to the realization I could lose her, and the weight of that sent me spiraling into a deep depression. Isolated and consumed by grief, I turned to self-harm once again. I could feel myself sinking fast, but deep down I knew I had to figure out a way out of this dark hole. I began seeing a therapist to help manage my depression and work through triggers that led to my self-harm. In 2020, I met my husband, and together we had a beautiful little girl. But while we were engaged, something happened that completely shook my world. My husband's brother had long struggled with substance abuse and mental health issues. There were times his behavior became aggressive, and that he made threats towards both my husband and myself. In May of 2022, he overdosed, but he survived. My husband and I went to the emergency room to see him, and what we encountered was a completely different person than the one I had known before. I can only describe him as looking like a whipped puppy, broken, vulnerable, and full of regret. He apologized to us and said he wanted to turn his life around, to get clean and to do better, so we made the decision to support him. We took him to his home, cleaned it up, bought groceries, and spent every moment we could with him that week, doing whatever we could to help him on his journey towards recovery. On May 27th, 2022, I left work early to spend some time with him before my husband was off work. I knocked on his door, but there was no answer. I knocked again and still no response. I assumed he was in the back room and couldn't hear me, but my gut told me something was very wrong. I unlocked the door and I found him. I vividly remember calling 911 and gripping the corduroy chair in my hand, feeling the cold fabric beneath my fingers. I kept hoping he was still alive. When the paramedics arrived, one of them looked at me and said, "We need the coroner." In that moment, it felt like the world stopped. I wanted to collapse, hoping that he was wrong and that this was some terrible dream. But it was real, and I now had to make the hardest call of my life to tell my husband that his baby brother was gone. Then came the heartbreaking task of informing his parents about the loss of their youngest child. I will never forget the image of his mother, staring ahead, gasping for breath before collapsing to the ground in uncontrollable sobs. That day changed my life, not just because Connor died, but because it marked the beginning of my struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder. I found myself battling intense symptoms, flashbacks, nightmares, overwhelming fits of rage. It's going on 4 years, and I've only been able to visit his grave twice. The nightmares became all-consuming, often replaying in my mind the image of walking back into his home, over and over again, as if I were stuck on an endless loop. Sleeping became a terrifying experience, as I dreaded reliving that day each time I closed my eyes. There were mornings I would drive to work, sobbing uncontrollably as the weight of my PTSD symptoms were taking over my life. I became withdrawn, distant, and numb, feeling like a mere shell of who I once was. I knew if I didn't seek help, I would fall into an even darker place. Fast forward to 2024, I started experiencing seizures. First, a grand mal seizure, convulsing, blacking out, tremors, and intense brain fog. I even at one point forgot how to turn off my own shower. From this, I continued to have seizures, and I was restricted from driving for months. I had test after test only to find out this wasn't medical. My neurologist told me, "Your brain is telling your body it's not doing well and it needs help." My body began to mimic seizures in order to tell me that it was struggling and that I was not okay. This wasn't the first time my body had manifested some kind of ailment in order to process stress. 2025 was the year that should have broke me. I carried the weight of knowing about past betrayals and clinging to the hope that it wasn't real. I was wrong again and again. I stand here alone, a single mother, navigating the uncharted waters of divorce and parenting plans. Emotional torment, gaslighting, words and actions that chipped away at my mind until I no longer recognized myself. The toll on my mental health was immense. Anxiety became my constant companion. Trust felt dangerous. I found myself battling exhaustion, intrusive thoughts, and the quiet grief of losing not only a relationship, but parts of myself. I'm a mental health advocate, and while I was fighting for others, somehow in the process, I had forgotten about me. It took a long time to come to terms with the fact that I had a mental health condition. I struggled with the idea that something is wrong with me and that the fear that this diagnosis would label me and push me further away from others. I clearly remember my mom telling me that if I ever started experiencing symptoms, I should let her know so I can get the help I needed. For years, I ignored that advice, but eventually I came to accept that it was okay for me to not be okay. I had to try multiple medications for depression and PTSD before I found the right one, a process that involved enduring severe side effects from the wrong medications, panic attacks, tremors, migraines, and so much more. I began seeing a counselor, and I now have been working with her for 6 years. Today, I'm on medication that helps manage my PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and I continue therapy twice a month to process my emotions. I also rely on coping strategies to get through each day, whether that's spending time with my daughter or drawing. These simple moments help me manage my mental health and keep moving forward. It's taken a long time, but I've made it to the other side and in recovery and understanding that life doesn't always follow the plan we set, but maybe that's part of the plan. Today, I'm a mental health advocate with NAMI Northern Illinois, working to ensure that people don't fall through the cracks of our broken mental health system. I'm currently pursuing a second master's degree in clinical mental health counseling because my personal journey is what drives me to become a therapist. I want to be the reason that someone survives their mental health struggles. I want to be part of a mental health system. I want to be part of changing a mental health system that continues to fail individuals like Connor. Above all, I want to show my daughter that even in the midst of chaos and loss, there's still good in this world. I've come to believe that this was the path that was always intended for me. I just had to take the scenic route. Thanks.
Thank you so, so much, Kenzie. I know you're not feeling the best, but I really appreciate you taking this time out to help us out with this endeavor today. Okay, now for my story. My name is Jeanette Towns. I'm the proud mother of two accomplished daughters. My oldest daughter is a registered nurse, a children's pastor, and a youth pastor as well. Her and her husband adopted natural siblings, a boy and a girl. My youngest daughter works at a preschool. She's in college to become a preschool teacher. She owns a business, and her husband have 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. I am an avid cook, and I love to cook for friends and family on a weekly basis. I'm also an avid Scrabble player, and if you come over my house to play Scrabble, you don't leave until I win, but I will feed you though. So in 1995, my life took a tragic turn after some medical malpractice. While in the emergency room with a complication, the doctor yelled to the nurse, "She's unraveling." I was promptly placed in a mental institution against my will. While there, I was loud, I was brash, wild, moody, and unpredictable. I couldn't shut up. Nothing that the hospital offered me seemed to help me. Then one day, the hospital offered me some medication for the first time. I and my then husband and children read the side effects of the medication, and I decided to not take it because it seemed like the side effects of the medication were worse than what I was already experiencing. So the hospital shut down while I was in there, and I ended up being the last person there. So because of this, I was left to fend for myself with no medication, no education, and no aftercare. What followed was 10 long years that I refer to as the dark years. My diagnosis was bipolar disorder. I met the legal definition of insanity, which means I was unable to understand or control my actions due to mental illness. I had an inability to distinguish right from wrong at that time. I would vacillate between periods of mania, and then I would plummet down into so deep, dark, suicidal depression. Neither I nor my family knew what was happening to me, as I seemed to be a completely different person. We were uneducated about mental illness. While manic, I was awake for days at a time. I cleaned excessively and I played music loudly all around the clock. I did not take into consideration that my husband and my children were trying to sleep. My personality was altered and my moods would switch rapidly. One minute I could be happy and feel on top of the world, and the next minute I could be furious and ranting and raving about something. I was very creative. I was full of ideas, and I often felt like I was the smartest person in the room. My senses were heightened and I felt keen. My speech pattern changed and I spoke rapidly, changing topics often. That is referred to as pressured speech. But when I sank down into depression, I didn't want to do anything. I could barely get out of the bed. As a matter of fact, the only time I would get out of the bed was to use the restroom, the bathroom, or to cook or eat something. Because I had no energy, my hygiene habits were very poor at that time. That's the part of depression that nobody really talks about. I didn't want to be around anybody. I isolated myself and I worried constantly. I didn't want anybody to know what I was going through. During my manic phases, I began to get in trouble with the law and I was repeatedly arrested. I was also institutionalized several more times. I was like a tornado going everywhere to destroy everything that I touched. I was even homeless by choice a few times. Imagine that, homeless by choice. I would hang out around the homeless shelter with all of the guys who just got out of prison, and I would run around with them rather than to be at home with my minister husband and my two beautiful daughters. While I was on the streets, I was hypersexual, which means that I had relations with total strangers. I didn't even have to know their name. That was risky behavior. And by all rights, I shouldn't even be alive at this point because of the things that I did at that time. And I had no idea what was happening to me. I was unaware that I was insane, and even though it was apparent to others. After going to jail several times, I was declared unfit to stand trial and I was remanded to a state run mental health facility. I was in for a 4-month stay. While there, I was medicated, then I was educated, and I was very well taken care of for the first time ever. The staff was caring, patient, and understanding of my condition. The medication I was prescribed was life altering. I slowly became a woman who had an understanding of the condition that I was diagnosed with, and I could clearly see that I was in the right place. When I first arrived, I wanted to show the staff that this was all a big mistake and that I should be let out of there. Um, I actually became much calmer and I no longer had racing thoughts and my speech pattern returned to normal. I was then able to sleep normally. When it was time for my discharge, I was given a care and treatment plan and I was linked up with a local mental health facility right here in Rockford. Because of my treatment, all criminal charges against me were dropped and I have a clean record. I have not been hospitalized for mental illness nor arrested since 2004. So I've been stable for 22 years. So then I began the difficult work of recovery once I got back to Rockford. I saw my case manager twice a day just to take my meds in front of her. And then I began the difficult work of recovery. I was med compliant. I kept all the appointments I had with my caseworker and I did whatever she asked me to do. Now I understood my diagnosis. That was 10 tragic years after the first manic episode. I actually thought for a long time that I was perfectly fine and that everyone around me had a problem. After receiving education, I realized that it was me the entire time. That caused me inward shame, but I learned to deal with my new reality. After I achieved recovery by the clinic standard, they offered me a full-time job there. I was hesitant. I asked the case manager, have you read my chart? Do you remember who I am? The staff assured me that I was ready to re-enter the workforce. I began to care for 8 chronically mentally ill men a day in an apartment type setting. All of the men had the same diagnosis, schizophrenia. So I assisted them with all of their activities of daily living. I passed them their meds every day. I taught the guys how to cook, how to clean. I ran them on their errands and I helped them do whatever they need to do throughout the day. That was the best job I ever had up until that point in my life. After I exited the workforce, I began to try to hide my story and pretend like nothing ever happened to me, as I was mired in profound stigma and shame. A childhood friend encouraged me to begin to tell my story in public and to write a book about my life. And after I got over myself, I did just that. It's apparent that I'm telling my story in public, and this is my first book, When Shattered Lives Become Whole. It's a look at bipolar disorder from the inside out. My new release is entitled Misplaced Love, A Cautionary Tale. And the second book is about all of the tragic mistakes that I made in relationships, often while I was ill. Both of the books are available on Amazon. I began college at the age of 59 after having been out of school since 1980. I finished my course of study with a 4.0 GPA. Today, I help train incoming doctors at the UIC College of Medicine, and I teach them how to get to know their patient first and not their diagnosis first. And I try to teach them to treat every patient with respect. I also help train law enforcement, whether it's a room full of sheriffs or state troopers or police officers. And what I teach them is how to deal with somebody that's in an active mental health crisis. I also teach the officers how to de-escalate a situation. I am now employed by NAMI Northern Illinois full-time. I am a certified recovery support specialist. In that capacity, I help people recover from mental illness and or substance use disorders. I have a caseload of about 50 clients right now that I take care of on a weekly basis. I check in with them and I provide them the resources that they need, as well as a listening ear. This is not a job for me. This is actually a career. proving that recovery is possible and that I was able to succeed and do more after my diagnosis and recovery than I was ever able to do prior to that. I do seminars on YouTube and Zoom to help educate people. I am trained in mental health first aid, and I am also a suicide prevention instructor. I also am in charge of In Our Own Voice, which is what we're doing now, and I'm a trainer on a statewide level. I have facilitated support groups throughout the city of Rockford, whether it's in a housing complex, a community center, or churches. I oversee a church-run mental wellness ministry entitled All of Me at my local place of worship. By the way, all of our stories are evolving and they're changing because, life goes on. I was recently, within the last year, diagnosed with PTSD complex type. So CPTSD. I was also diagnosed with major depressive disorder. I had no idea I was walking around with those diagnoses since my teenage years. So my story is still changing. It's still evolving, but I am able to function on a daily basis. And for that, I am forever grateful. All of my relationships have been restored and my life has forever been changed. Thank you very much. At this time, we are inviting Rob to tell his story. Rob, take it away. Rob, can you unmute and turn your camera on? Huh. Oh, here we go. Not sure if I can help Rob.
Can you turn on his video? Let's see.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, good.
Welcome, Rob. Unmute yourself, please.
Can you
Look
hear
a
me,
little.
Jeanette?
Now we can.
Okay, so everyone, I'm loud enough for the whole group, right? Okay, here we go. My name is Rob, and I'm a member of NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And what I'm about to tell you is called my In Our Own Voice presentation. And that means that I want to share with you my personal story in my own words of how my recovery has progressed and what I've come to understand so far in the last 35 years, experiencing and understanding my life through recovery. And what happened to me is that I likely was ready to hear this. Not all of us get to hear this recovery, and you can need it, but not hear it, but you have to be ready to hear it. So I likely was ready to finally hear this stuff. And the awakening catalyst was my first marriage ended. I was in shock. I couldn't imagine that such a thing could ever happen to me. I wondered what went wrong. How could this be? I don't want to be divorced. What don't I know? Well, a friend asked me a curious question. I was asked, was I raised in an alcoholic home? And I answered, well, I don't know. I never thought about it. And what would that have to do with anything? I had no idea that the parents who raised me had anything to do with who I am now. Wow, what a surprise. I have to mess with my computer here. The guidance I got while growing up made me exactly who I am now. I asked my first counselor, why don't I know how to do life? She told me that no one ever taught me. How could I know? You mean that I don't know how to do relationships, make friends, make decisions, have confidence, love myself, cook, buy a house, or do laundry? Right. You can't know all that stuff if you were never taught how to do it. Wow, it's not my fault. The only model I have for a relationship or learning how to do a relationship or seeing anyone doing a relationship is my parents. My parents did not have guests over to their house, so I didn't get the experience of how to maintain friendships. I began to seek out this growing recovery community. Recovery taught me that it was not my fault that I didn't know how to do life because no one ever taught me. I began to realize how much fear, doubt, and uncertainty I had lived with. I had no idea how that experience adversely affected my comfort with myself. It contributed to my looping, repetitive, compulsive, and intrusive thinking. This condition interfered with my ability to live in the present moment. I focused on the past and worried about the future. The experience of practicing recovery, learning all about my condition, attending retreats, experiential workshops, and talk therapy has helped me live with this handicap. I've devoted my life to recovery from codependency, gained peace of mind, loving kindness meditation. I've learned coaching skills, coupleship skills. My passion was human relationship skills. I attended consciousness groups, went back to school, and earned a master's degree in psychology when I turned 50. I became a licensed counselor and I saw patients at a counseling service, nonprofit type counseling service in Rolling Meadows. In spite of all of this personal growth work, I experienced the lowest point that I have ever felt. This predicament occurred approximately 2 years ago. I felt an episode of major clinical depression that was the lowest I have ever felt, that include feelings of loss of interest in everything that was my life, loss of life force, loss of energy, loss of caring about personal hygiene, and disinterest in housekeeping responsibilities. The only comfort was staying in bed throughout the days. 3 stressors happened in my life at that time that I was really unprepared for. The 3 included a loss of a relationship, my reality of entering elderhood, and stopping working. My first reaction to this condition, I felt, was disbelief. I couldn't imagine I or anyone could ever possibly feel despair like I felt. I was scared. It was at this period in my life that I discovered NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I needed information on this feeling that took my life over. From the NAMI programs, I learned that mental health conditions are illnesses influenced by genetics, environment, and lifestyle. The exact biological, physiological, psychological, sociological origins of mental health are not yet understood. Treatment is not precise, recovery is not linear, and relapses can happen. In addition, recovery is a lifelong journey and not a destination. Now, I did not want to hear that. I had enough of this depression. It scared me. It was uncomfortable. It wasn't having fun anymore. I wanted this dark feeling to go away right now, and I absolutely refused to have a so-called mental illness. It has taken a lot of work for me to reduce the rage, that learning that the cure for my hated condition is unknown. The guesswork of the possible medications that can help is frustrating and maddening. The suggestion of breath work, exercise, diet, and mindfulness seems unimaginably lame and ineffective for such a debilitating feeling. I have not yielded to acceptance that I have this mental illness. My psychiatrist has no idea what may have brought me up for air. I want my old feeling back more than anything. Since I tasted not being depressed, I feel that growing toward resolve and peace, toward not being attached to preferences, I can become free. My resistance to change and lack of acceptance of elderhood seem to be my prison. I am not ready to give in. I continually say yes to the universe, but for now, it seems to be the guidance that I'm drawn to. For now, this is as far as I have been able to grow on my recovery path. The lack of comfort for where I am now drives me on. A definite direction has not yet been revealed to me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak to us and share your heart with us. Rob, is this your first time sharing your story within our
It
own voice?
is.
Congratulations.
Thank you,
You did,
Jeanette.
you
Thank
did
you
it.
for believing in me.
Not a problem. Okay, so now it is 12:51. We have about 9 minutes left. If anyone in our audience has any questions, please put your questions in the chat. Warren will read the questions, and then the individual participant that it's directed towards can answer the question. Anybody at all?
Okay, thank you. I want to thank the panelists. And yes, what we want you to do is put it into the Q&A. We do have a comment from Isabel, says, thank you for your stories. I want to say the same thing. It was, Rob, you did an amazing job. And I really would like, at this point, if we don't do questions, I'm glad Keisha turned your camera on. Maybe we could turn it into a little panel discussion because this is fabulous. I really got a lot out of it. And yeah, we worked out the technical issues, but Rob, I'm so glad that you shared. I didn't get a chance because we were working on some uh, technical issues. I didn't get the chance to hear Kinsey and Keisha tell your stories, but um, Erica also comments. I agree. Thank you so much for your willingness to share. So, panelists, what were your impressions of each other's stories?
Well, I guess I'll start. I feel like a mother hen today because I trained Rob, I trained Kinsey, and did I train you, Keisha? Yes, I did. So they're like my babies in our own voice, and to hear them tell their stories, Rob for the first time, Kinsey's been out a few times with me, and Keisha, I don't get to hear you often, but you guys have such diverse stories, so different from each other, but yet there are some similarities. And I'm just so proud of everybody for stepping out and talking about the things that most people would not talk about.
Well, we do have a question here, and I think it's not directed to anyone in particular. So I'm going to direct the question to everyone. It says, what is one thing you want people to remember if they are afraid of asking for help? Does that, you
Um,
understand the question?
yes, I can
Keisha.
answer that question. I would say one thing to not forget is nobody on this earth is perfect. We are all humans. We all have emotions. It's not just you. So never, never think you are alone. You may think you're alone physically in that sense of that situation, but never, ever, ever think that you're by yourself. So, and like she said, everybody's stories sound the same, but emotionally, everybody knows that emotion and they know how I feel.
Thank you, Keisha.
I
Kenzie, what
wanted
is
to
one thing?
emphasize, oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Jeanette.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to emphasize something that Keisha said when she said, you are not alone. That's kind of my motto. You are not alone. Danielle laughs at me for saying it, but it is so important for people to know you're not the only one going through this, because when you go through these types of things, especially depression and being suicidal, you feel like you're the only one on the ship. And that's not true. So reach out, call NAMI. Kinsey and I will talk you through things. Kinsey and I will support you. We will be there for you on a weekly basis if you desire that type of support. And just know that help is available. You are not alone. And what's the best that could happen? You could actually get better.
Thank you. Kinsey, would you have anything you would want somebody to remember if they are afraid of asking for help?
Um, I mean, I feel like I went through that where like I even had people in my life telling me like if you need help, like reach out, and it's just it's hard because I feel like you have to wait till they're ready to. But also it's that conversation of just like they're not going to turn you away and not tell you that like there's something wrong with you. Um, they're going to tell you like, yeah, I'll help you or I'll find somebody who can help. Um, so it's one of those, it's like take the shot. I mean, it's nothing bad is going to come from it, really. You're going to get
Mhm.
the help you need.
So you're saying that help is available.
Hmm.
Hmm. Rob, would you have anything you would want people to remember if they are afraid of asking for help?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Some people say to me, if you need any help, ask me. And some people can't do it. And that used to hurt me. And that used to shut me down from asking for any more help. And so I found out that there are people whose hearts are open and that helps them to help others. And the times I've heard that I can't help you, um, it, I haven't rejected those people, but they're a different level of friend than the friend that I can call day or night.
Hmm.
That's about it.
Yeah, so if the first person can't help you or says that they can't, there are other people you can ask, right?
Yeah, right.
And also, I want to also, you didn't mention that Rob actually is one of the facilitators of Group Hope, which is a support group that meets on Thursday evenings at the Rosecrans Ware Center at 5:30. And so a support group like Group Hope or NAMI Connection, that's full of people who want to help you. And sometimes it's just
That's right.
conversation that helps, right? All right. Thank you, guys. There is a comment from Jacqueline. She says, "This is my first meeting. Thank you for your stories." She has a daughter diagnosed with multiple conditions, and she is also starting her journey to understand her daughter and how to help herself also. So thank you. So thank you for your comment, Jacqueline.
Well,
Yeah.
Warren, it looks like we're out of time.
Oh, well, let me give, if we have time for one more question really quickly, I'll ask you, Jeanette. This one says, has sharing your story or personal journey with other people helped your recovery? And if so, how?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the more I share my story, the stronger I actually get. And the more people come to me and say, you have no idea how your story helped me. So it's not about me, it's about helping others. And helping others makes me stronger.
Well, we have one last question, and I know that Kinsey, you're typing an answer. Would you like to respond? Terry says, what are some of the biggest barriers you've run into getting help? Insurance, finances, legal issues?
I would say insurance is a big thing. A lot of the individuals who reach out to us do not have insurance. Finances, though, too. I mean, if you're looking at, like, say, going to a therapist once a week, it's $150 minimum usually, without insurance. And even with insurance, it's usually about $50, depending on the insurance carrier. And then depending on what kind of therapist you need. I go to two different ones, one for EMDR and a regular one, so I'm paying at least $100 a week going in with insurance. So I think finances is a huge barrier, because a lot of people just they give up because there's nothing that they feel like they can do to cover the cost. But you can also have them reach out to us. We have partners that help with that. And we usually try to find some way around that to get people the help they need.
I
So
also would like to
bottom
put
line,
something in there. Can I interject?
please. Yes,
So
Keisha.
when I work with insurance, so I work with Blue Cross. So yeah, I deal with this every day when people check their behavioral health benefits. A few factors. It all depends on your company. It all depends on what plan they have available to you and what options they present to you. Also, if you are employed, look into your employee assistance program. Basically, it's like a free program where they do offer free sessions. Some companies offer a certain amount of sessions. Some companies offer unlimited sessions. So if you are employed, I would reach out and, look in your benefits, Workday app. Sometimes people ignore that type of stuff, but look into that type of stuff. Those programs are at no cost.
So I want to respect everybody's time. Thank you for panelists. Thank you, audience members. Um, if you have additional questions, you can email us at info@naminorthernillinois.org, or any one of us, you go by our first names, you can reach us by email. Thank you guys. Thank you for joining us, and we'll check our website for further future leading the conversations. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.